Ethan Harper groaned as he opened his eyes, his head pounding like a drum. The last thing he remembered was piloting his ship, desperately trying to escape the Thraxi fighters that had ambushed him. Now he was in an unfamiliar place, and the cold metallic walls of the room told him he wasn't on Earth anymore. He tried to move but found his wrists and ankles bound by strange, glowing cuffs. The room wasn't what he expected for a prison cell. It was large and lavish, filled with silk-draped furniture, shimmering alien ornaments, and an artificial skylight casting a soft, golden glow. But the beauty of the place didn't hide its true nature. This was no palace. It was a cage. As his vision cleared, Ethan noticed he wasn't alone. There were others, women of different shapes, colors, and species. Some had scales that shimmered like rainbows, others bore luminous markings on their skin, and one had translucent wings folded tightly against her back. Their gazes shifted toward him. Suspicion and fear etched on their faces. He could tell they weren't just captives. They were survivors, hardened by whatever horrors this place had inflicted upon them. Another one, a sharp voice, broke the silence. A tall woman with dark, gleaming eyes and sharp, angular features sneered at him. A human, no less. Great, just what we needed. Ethan struggled to sit up. Where am I? Who are you people? The woman crossed her arms. You're in Voritak's collection. He's the Thraxi warlord who owns this fortress. And we're his trophies. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Trophies? His mind raced, piecing together the implications. These women weren't just prisoners. They were part of some grotesque harem, forced into this gilded cage for the amusement of a tyrant. Why am I here? I'm no trophy, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty coursing through him. The woman smirked. You're here because you're alive, and Voritak doesn't waste resources. If he doesn't find a use for you, he'll toss you to his guards for target practice. Lucky you. Before Ethan could respond, a quieter voice spoke. Enough, Xerix. He's not our enemy. The speaker was a serene-looking woman with silver hair that flowed like liquid metal and eyes that seemed to see straight through him. My name is Celia, she said, addressing Ethan directly. And if you want to survive, you need to listen carefully. Ethan nodded, sensing that Celia was different from the others. While Xerix radiated anger and defiance, Celia had an air of calm authority. The other women seemed to defer to her, their postures softening slightly in her presence. Celia continued, This place is a prison, but it's also a game. Voritak pits us against each other, feeding off our mistrust and fear. If you want to escape, you'll need allies. And right now, you have none. Ethan glanced around the room. Most of the women avoided his gaze, their faces a mix of suspicion and indifference. He couldn't blame them. A human in a Thraxi warlord's harem was probably the last thing they'd expected. I don't belong here, Ethan said, trying to sound confident. I was just a pilot, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't want to be part of his sick game. Celia's lips curved into a faint smile. None of us do. But wanting isn't enough. If you want to survive, and perhaps even escape, you'll have to earn our trust. Words won't be enough. Xerix snorted. Good luck with that, human. We've seen enough lies and betrayals to last a lifetime. Ethan's mind raced. Trust. He'd learned in his years as a pilot that trust wasn't given. It was earned through action. If he was going to escape this nightmare, he needed to prove himself. But how? He didn't even know the rules of this twisted game yet. As he pondered his next move, the door to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss. A towering Thraxi guard stepped in, his insect-like eyes scanning the room. The new one, he growled, pointing at Ethan. You're summoned. Ethan felt his stomach churn, but he forced himself to stand. Celia's gaze met his, and she gave him a barely perceptible nod. Remember, she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Actions speak louder than words. As Ethan was led away, He couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was clear. Survival in this place would require more than courage. It would take cunning, alliances, and a determination stronger than steel. Ethan Harper was shoved into a massive hall, the alien guard's claws pressing against his back. The room was darker and colder than the chamber he'd just left. At its center stood a throne carved from obsidian-like stone, its edges gleaming under the dim, flickering lights. Sitting on the throne was Voritak, the Thraxi warlord. His hulking form was covered in metallic armor, and his mandibles clicked rhythmically, as if calculating Ethan's worth. Ethan stood tall, refusing to let the warlord see his fear. He had faced dangers before, but this was different. Voritak's glowing red eyes fixed on him, and for a moment, it felt like the warlord was peeling apart his soul. "You are human," Voritak said, his voice deep and guttural. "Weak and fragile, yet you have survived where others have failed." Ethan clenched his fists. "I survived because I'm not afraid of you." The room fell silent. A low growl escaped Voritak's mandibles, but instead of anger, the warlord seemed amused. "Courage," he said, leaning forward. "A rare trait. But courage without strength is meaningless." Voritak waved his hand dismissively, and the guard shoved Ethan back out of the room. As the doors slammed shut behind him, Ethan exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. Whatever test Voritak had in mind, it wasn't over. Back in the chamber, the alien women watched as Ethan stumbled back in. Xerix was the first to speak. "Still alive, I see. That's disappointing." Ethan ignored her jab and walked toward Celia, who was sitting near the edge of the room, her silver hair glinting under the artificial light. "You said I needed to earn trust. What do I need to do?" he asked, his tone firm. Celia tilted her head, studying him. "The others won't trust you easily. They'd been hurt too many times. Some have lost everything. You're an outsider, and worse, you're human. But there is one way." Ethan crossed his arms. "I'm listening." Celia gestured toward a small corner of the chamber where a glowing console hummed softly. "That terminal connects to parts of the fortress. Voritak uses it to monitor us. It's heavily restricted, but if you can unlock it, you might find something useful, something that could help us all." Ethan frowned. "If it's so important, why haven't any of you tried?" Xerix snorted. "Do you think we haven't? The terminal is coded with Thraxi tech. None of us can figure it out." Ethan walked over to the console, examining it closely. The symbols on the screen were strange but oddly systematic. Years of navigating human and alien tech as a pilot gave him some confidence. It wouldn't be easy, but it wasn't impossible. "I'll try it," he said, glancing back at Celia. "But if I do this, I'll need your help. If we're going to escape, we need to work together." Celia gave him a small nod. "You have my help, but trust isn't built on words alone. Actions speak louder." Ethan got to work, his fingers gliding over the alien symbols as he tried to make sense of the terminal. The system was complex, requiring logic puzzles to unlock different layers of access. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked, but he ignored the burning ache in his shoulders. Behind him, the women whispered among themselves. Some were skeptical, others curious. Xerix scoffed loudly. "He's wasting his time. No human can crack Thraxi tech." An hour passed, and just as Ethan was about to lose hope, a soft chime echoed from the console. The screen flickered, and a grid of encrypted files appeared. He turned to the group, a triumphant grin on his face. "Got it." The room fell silent as Celia stepped forward, her silver eyes scanning the screen. This is a map of the fortress," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "You've done what none of us could." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "If we know the layout, we can plan a way out. We just need to figure out the best route." Before Celia could respond, a loud alarm blared through the chamber. The console's screen flashed red as a voice boomed over the speakers. "Unauthorized access detected. Guards dispatched." Panic swept through the room as the women looked to Celia, their leader. Ethan stood firm, his mind working fast. We need to shut this down before they find us. Celia grabbed his arm, her voice steady despite the chaos. No, there's no time. We need to hide. Ethan hesitated but followed Celia's lead. As the women scrambled to hide, Ethan felt a spark of determination flare within him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. If he wanted their trust, he had to protect them. The door burst open, and 2 Thraxi guards stormed in. Ethan pressed himself against the shadows, holding his breath. The women were silent, their fear palpable. As the guards searched the room, Ethan felt the weight of his decision. He had taken the first step toward earning their trust, but the road ahead would be dangerous, and he wasn't sure he could survive it alone. Ethan Harper held his breath as the Thraxi guards scanned the room with their piercing red eyes. Their insect-like bodies moved with precision, their clawed hands gripping weapons that hummed ominously. Hidden in the shadows with the others, Ethan knew this was a critical moment. If they were discovered now, the plan, and their lives, would be over before it even began. The guards spoke in guttural clicks, their alien language incomprehensible to Ethan. Celia, crouched beside him, placed a finger to her lips, urging him to remain still. One guard approached the console, its mandibles clicking in frustration as it inspected the now-locked terminal. The other stalked closer to their hiding spot, sniffing the air like a predator searching for prey. Ethan's heart pounded, but his pilot instincts took over. He grabbed a loose piece of metal from the floor and, with a flick of his wrist, tossed it across the room. The clatter drew the guards' attention instantly. They turned and moved toward the noise, their weapons raised. Celia gave him a sharp nod, and the group slipped silently into the shadows, moving away from the danger. Once they were far enough, Ethan let out a slow breath. It wasn't over, but they had bought themselves time. Back in their chamber, the tension was palpable. Xerix paced angrily, her sharp eyes glaring at Ethan. "You've put us all in danger," she snapped. "Your little stunt will get us killed." Ethan stood his ground. "And what was your plan?" "Stay here and wait for Voratak to decide who he wants to torment next. At least I'm trying to do something." "Enough," Celia said, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "The guards are suspicious now, but they found nothing. We still have the map, and that gives us an advantage." The group gathered around the glowing image Ethan had unlocked on the terminal. It showed the fortress in intricate detail, from the harem chambers to the heavily guarded exit points. There were also unexplored sections, marked with strange symbols that none of them could decipher. "This area," Celia pointed to a passage leading to the lower levels, "is our best chance. It's less patrolled, but we'll need to find a way to bypass the security checkpoints." One of the women, a petted alien with shimmering blue skin named Kara, hesitated before speaking. "I can disable basic Thraxi systems," she said, her voice timid. "I worked on their ships before I was captured, but I'll need access to a control panel, and those are heavily guarded." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll create a distraction, something big enough to draw the guards away." Xerix folded her arms. "And who's going to risk their neck for that?" "You?" "If I have to, yes," Ethan replied without hesitation. The room went silent. The women exchanged uncertain glances. They had lived in fear for so long, their hope crushed by Voratak's cruelty. Now this human, a stranger, was offering to risk his life for them. It was hard to believe, but something in his voice stirred a spark of trust. Celia stepped forward. "We'll all have to take risks. If we want freedom, we must work together. This isn't just Ethan's fight, it's ours." Reluctantly, Xerix nodded. "Fine, but if you mess this up, human, don't expect me to save you." Ethan smirked. "Noted." The group spent the next few hours devising their plan. Ethan would lead the distraction, drawing the guards to the upper levels. Meanwhile, Kara would infiltrate a control panel and disable the lower-level security systems. Celia and the others would prepare for the next phase, gathering supplies and weapons from hidden caches within the chamber. As the plan took shape, Ethan noticed a change in the group. The women, once divided and mistrustful, began to work together, their shared goal forging a fragile alliance. Even Xerix, though still brash, offered her insights on Thraxi patrol patterns. When the time came, Ethan stood at the chamber's exit, ready to face the guards. Celia approached him, her silver eyes steady. "You're taking a great risk for us," she said softly. "Why?" Ethan shrugged, his expression serious. "Because no one deserves to live like this, and because I believe we can win." Celia gave him a faint smile. "Then don't die, human. We still need you." With that, Ethan slipped out of the chamber, his heart pounding with anticipation. He moved through the dimly lit corridors, using his knowledge of the map to stay ahead of patrols. When he reached the upper levels, he found his target, a storage area filled with volatile Thraxi energy cores. Grabbing a loose pipe, Ethan struck one of the cores, creating a loud, echoing crash. Alarms blared, and within moments, the sound of guards rushing toward him filled the air. Ethan grinned. "Come and get me." As the guards closed in, Ethan darted through the corridors, leading them on a wild chase. He knew he couldn't outfight them, but he could outsmart them. Every step he took was calculated, every turn designed to buy Kara and the others more time. Back in the lower levels, Kara worked quickly, her nimble fingers flying over the alien control panel. Celia and the others stood guard, their hearts pounding as they waited for Ethan's signal. The plan was in motion, but success was far from guaranteed. Ethan knew the risks, but he also knew one thing for certain. He wasn't giving up, not now, not ever. Ethan sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, his pulse racing as alarms echoed in every direction. The Thraxi guards were relentless, their clawed feet clattering against the metal floor as they pursued him. Sweat dripped down his face, but he pushed himself harder, each step carrying him further away from the others. The plan depended on him creating as much chaos as possible, and he wasn't about to let them down. He darted into a storage bay, filled with strange alien crates. Grabbing a loose pipe, he swung it against the nearest stack, sending containers crashing to the floor. The noise was deafening, but it had the desired effect. A group of guards stormed into the room moments later, their weapons at the ready. "Come on," Ethan shouted, taunting them as he ran toward another exit. The guards roared in anger, chasing after him. He zigzagged through the corridors, using his knowledge of the map to stay one step ahead. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever, but he didn't need to. All he had to do was buy Kara enough time to disable the security systems. Back in the lower levels, Kara's hands moved quickly over the glowing control panel. Her blue skin shimmered with sweat, but her focus never wavered. Each line of code she bypassed brought them one step closer to freedom. Celia stood nearby, her silver eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. "Almost there," Kara whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. Celia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're doing well. Keep going." The other women were scattered around the chamber, gathering makeshift weapons and supplies. Xerix, ever the skeptic, grumbled as she inspected a metal rod. "This is madness. If the Thraxi catch us, we're as good as dead." Celia's calm voice cut through Xerix's doubt. "If we do nothing, we're already dead. Ethan is risking everything to give us this chance. We owe it to him, and ourselves, to see it through." Xerix hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. "Fine, but if this goes sideways, I'm blaming the human." Meanwhile, Ethan found himself cornered in a narrow corridor. The guards had boxed him in, their weapons glowing with energy. He glanced around desperately, searching for an escape route. His eyes landed on a vent overhead. It was a long shot, but it was his only option. Using the last of his strength, Ethan leaped up and grabbed the edge of the vent. He pulled himself inside just as a blast of energy sizzled past his feet. The cramped space was stifling, but it provided a temporary reprieve. He crawled through the vent, his breaths coming in short gasps. He emerged in an unfamiliar room, one filled with strange, glowing machinery. His gaze fell on a large device in the center of the room, pulsing with energy. It looked important, maybe even critical to the fortress's operations. Ethan grinned. "Let's make things interesting." Grabbing a heavy object from a nearby table, he smashed it against the device. Sparks flew, and the machinery began to whir loudly. Alarms blared, louder than ever, as the fortress's lights flickered erratically. "That should keep them busy," Ethan muttered before slipping back into the corridors. Kara let out a triumphant gasp as the control panel's lights turned green. "I did it," she exclaimed. "The lower-level security systems are down." Celia smiled, relief washing over her. "Good work. Now we wait for Ethan's signal." As if on cue, the alarms above them changed pitch, signaling a new level of chaos in the fortress. Celia's smile widened. "That's it. He's done his part. It's time to move." The group hurried through the now unlocked passageway, their makeshift weapons clutched tightly. The corridors ahead were eerily quiet, but the map Ethan had unlocked showed them the way forward. "We're getting closer to the escape route," Celia said, her voice steady. "Stay alert. The Thraxi won't give up easily." As they advanced, Xerix glanced at Celia. "You seem awfully confident in the human. Why?" Celia hesitated for a moment before replying. "Because he's shown us something we haven't had in a long time. Hope. And sometimes, hope is all you need to win." Ethan, bruised and exhausted, finally found his way back to the group. The women looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Even Xerix managed a grudging nod of approval. "You're alive," Celia said, a hint of relief in her voice. "Barely," Ethan replied, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. "But the distraction worked. The guards are too busy dealing with the mess upstairs to notice us down here." Kara stepped forward, her face glowing with pride. "I disabled the security systems. We're clear to move to the next phase." Ethan straightened up, his determination renewed. "Good. Then let's not waste any more time. We're not stopping until we're free." The group moved as one, their fear replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in years, the possibility of freedom felt within reach. And for Ethan, the fight was no longer just about survival. It was about giving these women a chance to reclaim their lives. As they pressed on, one thought burned in his mind. They were going to win, no matter the cost. Ethan Harper led the group through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps silent as shadows. The fortress hummed with energy, its alarms still echoing faintly from the chaos Ethan had created above. With the map firmly in his memory and Kara's hacking skills giving them a head start, freedom felt tantalizingly close. But Ethan knew better than to let his guard down. The Thraxi weren't the kind to leave loose ends. Celia walked beside him, her silver eyes scanning their surroundings. Behind them, Kara clutched a small toolkit, her nervous glances betraying her fear. Xerix brought up the rear, her sharp features set in a scowl as she gripped a makeshift weapon, a jagged metal rod. The other women followed closely, their expressions a mix of determination and wariness. "We're nearing the storage bay," Ethan said quietly. "If we're lucky, we'll find supplies or something we can use to defend ourselves." Xerix scoffed. "Luck won't save us if Voratak catches up." Celia shot her a warning look. "Focus, Xerix. This isn't the time for doubt." The group entered the storage bay, a vast room filled with crates and machinery. Ethan motioned for them to spread out and search. They quickly got to work, prying open containers and rummaging through the alien equipment. Ethan found a small cache of energy packs, which could be repurposed as makeshift explosives. Kara unearthed a set of tools that could be useful for bypassing further security systems. "We're making progress," Ethan said, nodding approvingly. "Let's keep." A loud clang echoed through the room, cutting him off. Everyone froze, their eyes darting to the source of the noise. From the shadows emerged a figure, one of their own. Taylor, a tall alien woman with violet skin and sharp, glowing eyes, stepped forward. Her hands were raised, but her expression was anything but apologetic. Behind her, two Thraxi guards emerged, their weapons trained on the group. "It's over," Taylor said, her voice cold. "Surrender now, and Voritak might show mercy." Ethan's heart sank as realization hit him. You betrayed us." Taylor's gaze flickered to him, but there was no regret in her eyes. "You don't understand. This plan of yours, it's suicide. Voritak knows everything. He promised me freedom if I helped him." Xerix let out a furious growl. "Freedom? Do you think he'll let you go? You're a fool." The Thraxi guards stepped closer, their weapons humming ominously. Ethan's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the betrayal had shattered the fragile trust they'd built. But he couldn't let it end here, not when they were so close. "Taylor, listen to me," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady. "You think Voritak will honor his word? He's a tyrant. He doesn't care about you. The moment you're no longer useful, he'll discard you like the rest of us." Taylor hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw doubt flicker across her face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I've made my choice," she said, her voice hardening. "And so have you." The guards raised their weapons, and Ethan acted on instinct. Grabbing one of the energy packs he'd found, he hurled it at the nearest guard. The pack exploded in a burst of light, throwing the Thraxi off balance. "Run," Ethan shouted. Chaos erupted. The group scattered, dodging the guards' blasts as they dove for cover. Xerix lunged at one guard, her metal rod swinging with deadly precision. Celia pulled Kara behind a stack of crates, shielding her from the crossfire. Ethan grabbed another energy pack and flung it at the remaining guard. The explosion sent the alien sprawling, giving them a brief window to escape. "This way," he yelled, motioning for the others to follow. The group sprinted through the corridors, the sound of Thraxi reinforcements echoing behind them. Celia ran beside Ethan, her breathing ragged. "We're not going to make it at this pace," she said. "We will," Ethan replied, determination burning in his eyes. "We have to." They reached a narrow passageway, marked on the map as a potential escape route. Kara quickly set to work disabling the door's security system, her hands trembling as she worked. Xerix stood guard, her eyes darting nervously between the corridor and the approaching footsteps. "Come on, Kara," Ethan urged. "We're running out of time." "I'm trying." Kara snapped, her voice cracking under the pressure. "This system is more advanced than the last one." Celia placed a calming hand on Kara's shoulder. "You can do this. Just focus." With a final, desperate keystroke, the doors slid open. The group hurried through, sealing it behind them just as the Thraxi guards arrived. They pounded on the door, their guttural roars muffled by the thick metal. Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. That was too close. Celia nodded, her expression grim. "Taylor's betrayal almost cost us everything. We need to be more careful." Xerix shook her head, her anger barely contained. "No more traitors. If anyone else thinks about turning on us, they won't get the chance." Ethan placed a hand on Xerix's shoulder. "We can't afford to lose ourselves to fear and mistrust. We're in this together, or not at all." The group exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. The betrayal had shaken them, but their resolve remained. They had come too far to turn back now. As they pressed on, Ethan's mind was filled with questions. How many more obstacles lay ahead? And could they truly trust each other after what had just happened? One thing was certain, their fight for freedom was far from over. The group moved cautiously through the dim passageway, the echoes of their hurried breaths, the only sound in the narrow corridor. The betrayal by Taylor had left a heavy weight on everyone's minds, but there was no time to dwell on it. Ethan Harper knew that hesitation would cost them everything. "Where does this lead?" Xerix asked, her voice sharp as ever. Ethan glanced at the map glowing faintly on the small device he carried. "It's an auxiliary control room. If we can reach it, we might be able to shut down more of the fortress's systems, or even find a way to disable the guards." Kara perked up at the mention of technology. "I can handle the controls if we get there, but the Thraxi won't leave a room like that unguarded." Leia nodded, her silver eyes scanning the path ahead. "We'll deal with that when the time comes. Keep moving." As they approached the end of the passageway, the group came upon a massive door etched with glowing alien rooms. It was taller than any of them and radiated a faint, ominous hum. Ethan touched the surface, feeling the energy coursing through it. "This must be it," he said. Kara stepped forward, her hands already reaching for the control panel beside the door. "Give me a moment." Ethan and Leia stood guard while Kara worked. The others huddled close, their nerves evident in their shifting movements. Ethan couldn't blame them. Every step forward seemed to bring them closer to danger. "It's strange," Leia said quietly, standing beside him. "This place. It wasn't always like this. Voratak wasn't always this cruel." Ethan glanced at her. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" She nodded, her gaze distant, long enough to see the fortress change from a place of strength to a prison. "Voratak wasn't always a tyrant. Once, he sought to unify the Thraxi and their allies. But power changed him. He became paranoid, cruel, and anyone who challenged him ended up like us." Before Ethan could respond, Kara let out a triumphant gasp. "Got it." The massive door slid open, revealing a cavernous room filled with towering machines and glowing consoles. The hum of energy was almost deafening, and the room pulsed with a rhythmic light, like the heartbeat of the fortress itself. "This is it," Ethan said. "Let's find out what secrets Voratak is hiding." Kara rushed to the nearest console, her fingers flying over the alien symbols. The others spread out cautiously, searching for anything that could help their escape. Ethan's eyes were drawn to the far end of the room, where a strange, pulsating device stood encased in a shimmering energy field. "What is that?" Xerix asked, stepping up beside him. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, moving closer. "But it doesn't look like anything we've seen before." Leia joined them, her expression darkening as she examined the device. "It's Thraxi tech, but it's older. Much older. This isn't something Voratak created. He must have found it." Kara's voice called out from across the room. "I've accessed the system. There's data here about the fortress, the guards, even Voratak himself." "What does it say?" Leia asked, hurrying over. Kara's eyes scanned the alien script. "This device, it's a power source, but it's also a weapon. It amplifies energy, enough to destroy entire fleets or control mines." Ethan's stomach turned. "Control mines? You mean Voratak's been using this to manipulate people?" Kara nodded grimly. "That's why the guards are so loyal. He's using this to bend their will. It explains why so many of us felt strange when we arrived here. The device weakens resistance, makes it easier to control us." Leia's voice was firm. "Then we destroy it." Xerix raised an eyebrow. "Destroy it? Are you insane? If this thing is that powerful, it could take out the entire fortress. And us with it." Ethan stepped forward, his jaw tight. "If we leave it, Voratak will keep using it to enslave others. We have to take the risk." The group fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Kara broke the silence. "There's a way to overload it, but I'll need time. And once I start, there's no going back." "Do it," Leia said without hesitation. "We'll cover you." Kara nodded, her hands trembling as she began working on the console. Ethan and the others spread out, ready to defend her. The tension in the room was suffocating as every second dragged on. Then the sound of approaching footsteps shattered the silence. The Thraxi guards had found them. "They're here," Xerix shouted, raising her weapon. Ethan moved into position, his mind racing. Hold them off as long as you can. Kara, keep working. The first wave of guards stormed into the room, their weapons firing bright bursts of energy. The group fought back fiercely, using every ounce of strength and skill they had. Xerix was a whirlwind of fury, her metal rod clashing against the guard's armor. Scifi moved with precision, striking weak points with deadly accuracy. Ethan fought like a man possessed, his determination burning brighter than ever. He couldn't let this be the end, not after everything they'd endured. Behind him, Kara's voice rose above the chaos. It's almost done, just a little longer. Ethan glanced back, his heart pounding. The device was glowing brighter, its energy building to a dangerous level. They had to hold out, just a few more seconds. The fight wasn't over yet, but the endgame had begun, and Ethan knew they were on the brink of either freedom or destruction. The room was chaos. Blasts of energy lit up the shadows as Thraxi guards charged into the control room, their weapons firing bright bolts that shattered the air around Ethan and the others. The sound of metal striking metal echoed through the chamber as the group fought desperately to protect Kara, who was still bent over the console, working frantically. Cover her, Ethan shouted, ducking to avoid a blast aimed at his head. He returned fire, his shot hitting one of the guards in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. Xerix swung her makeshift weapon with ferocity, knocking a guard off balance and sending him tumbling into a stack of crates. She growled as she turned back to face another, her eyes blazing. These bastards won't know what hit them. Ethan's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he joined her in fending off the attackers. But the pressure was building. They had only moments before the entire fortress would be upon them. Kara was almost done, but time was slipping away. Kara, how much longer? Scifi called out, her silver eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. I'm almost there. Kara's voice was strained, her fingers flying across the alien console, her hands trembling from the pressure. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she didn't stop. Just a little longer. Ethan moved to her side, firing at the guards who were closing in. The battle was intense, but his focus was on Kara. If they couldn't hold the line, the plan would fail. Suddenly, a blast from behind sent Ethan stumbling forward. He turned just in time to see one of the guards raise his weapon at Kara. Without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, pushing Kara out of the way just as the energy blast struck the console, sending sparks flying everywhere. Ethan, Kara cried, fear and panic in her voice. Ethan's body slammed into the ground, the pain shooting through him like fire, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through it. The blast had burned across his arm, but he was still alive. I'm fine, he said, his voice strained. Just keep going. Kara's hands were shaking as she rushed to fix the damaged console. The alarms were louder now, and the whole fortress seemed to be responding to their presence. But Kara, determined and fierce, kept at it, her fingers dancing across the keys with a focus Ethan hadn't seen before. Almost there, she murmured, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Just need to override the final security protocols. The guards were regrouping, advancing faster. Scifi was pushing them back, but they were outnumbered. Ethan knew that they couldn't afford another mistake. Kara, we need to move now. I can't, she shouted. I have to finish this, or we're dead. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He looked around, spotting Xerix, who was locked in a battle with 2 Thraxi guards. She was struggling but holding her own. Xerix, Ethan called. Get to Kara. She needs protection. Xerix barely spared him a glance but nodded, her face a mask of focus. She moved toward Kara, swinging her rod to knock one of the guards out of the way, buying Kara just enough time to finish her task. I'm done, Kara yelled, relief flooding her voice. The room went quiet for a second as the glow of the console changed. The hum of energy that had been pulsing through the walls began to fade, and the alarm sputtered and died. The fortress shuddered, the power flickering. "What happened?" Xerix asked, stepping back to join them, her eyes scanning for the next attack. "The weapon," Kara said, her voice breathless. "It's disabled. I overloaded the system. The power's gone. We have a chance." A low rumble echoed through the walls as the first of the Thraxi reinforcements began to move in. They were coming, but now Ethan knew they could escape. "Let's go," Ethan shouted, helping Kara to her feet. They ran toward the exit, with Kara leading the way. The group was close now, only a few more halls between them and the exit. As they reached the last corner, they heard the distant sound of more guards rushing toward them. "Keep moving," Silaya urged, her silver eyes hard with resolve. "We've got no time." They reached the final door, and Kara quickly began working on the last lock, her fingers flying over the controls. Just as the door slid open, a blast from behind sent debris flying, narrowly missing them. "Go," Ethan yelled, shoving Kara ahead. They ran through the door, out into the open. The cold air of the night greeted them, but there was no time to stop and savor the feeling of freedom. The Thraxi would be on their tail soon. "We need to get to the ship," Ethan shouted, already scanning the horizon. Xerix looked at him, her expression still tense. "You think we're safe? The Thraxi will hunt us down." "We'll make it," Ethan said, determination in his voice. "We're alive, and that's what matters. We fought too hard to give up now." The group ran through the desolate landscape, their footsteps the only sound in the cold night. Behind them, the fortress still loomed, but it was no longer their prison. Ahead, the faint glow of a distant landing pad shimmered in the darkness. Their ship was waiting. As they neared the ship, Ethan felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had done it. Together. Silaya, standing beside him, gave him a rare, approving look. "You were right," she said softly. "Sometimes, hope is all you need." Ethan nodded, looking at the women who had once been his captives, but were now his allies. "And trust. That's what kept us alive." As the ship's hatch opened, they filed inside, their bodies bruised and exhausted, but their spirits unbroken. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a spark of hope. They had escaped the fortress. They had won, and together they would keep fighting.